I'm Owen Bigland. This is the Inside Edge video blog. So as I've been warning my viewers now for the last 3 or 4 months or so, the NDP government now has announced yesterday their new budget for the province, as well as their new home strategy. As I was telling people, warning people about the last few months, we were expecting some new taxes, maybe some modifications to existing taxes. That's kind of the NDP's playbook here to try and cool the red-hot Vancouver real estate market. So they didn't disappoint. They have changed some existing taxes, like the foreign buyers tax. They've also added a couple of new ones here as well. So I thought I'm going to do this blog in two parts, and I'll probably even do a couple more blogs later next month as well, because there's a lot to digest here. And to be honest, I've spent in the last couple of days here about 4 hours on this. I've been inundated with phone calls from clients, current clients, past clients, some media, some fellow realtors, trying to get more information. It's typical of government budgets, and when they announce these taxes, a lot of them are pretty vague. I don't think the NDP government even knows themselves right now how they're going to implement a lot of these taxes, how they're going to be enforced, who's going to be exempt from them. So I'm going to still need several more weeks here to put all this together. But I think I've got a pretty decent grasp on it. It's taken me some time, and I've had to go to places like the Globe and Mail and a bunch of different newspaper sites and some chat boards. I had to make a call to the Vancouver Real Estate Board. I had to make a call to the Real Estate Council of British Columbia. I even talked to my accountant to try and get all this information together. And it's going to take a while to decipher all this. But in this blog, let me just address the taxes that have been announced, and I'll give you my little spin or take on it, if it's going to have any effect on the market. And it might get a little unwieldy because there's a lot of stuff here. And again, I'm still trying to piece a lot of this stuff together myself. But here we go. I'm going to try and keep this to about 10 minutes and then stay tuned to part 2 on this as well. So the main takeaways here as far as real estate goes. The NDP now has increased the foreign buyers tax from 15% to 20%. Now, in my opinion, this is a non-event. If you've been watching my blogs for the last year, you'll know that the foreign buyers tax, first off, there are not a lot of foreign buyers. I know I'm going to get a lot of comments on my YouTube blog here saying that the numbers aren't true that come out from the government and CMHC and everything else. But the numbers are, let's just say a ballpark, it was just under 5% is what they're thinking were foreign buyers. I think it's a lot less than that now. So there are very few people that are buying properties that are triggering that foreign buyers tax. So the fact that they went from 15% to 20% is a non-event. It's going to have zero effect on the market. And let me explain to you here why this is the way it is. First off, I've talked about it before. As a realtor, a lot of people don't realize this, and the media doesn't talk about this. 15 months ago, the real estate board changed all our contracts. We now, on the front page of the contract of purchase and sale, have to declare whether the buyer or seller are foreign buyers for tax purposes. So we're tracking every one of these sales since the foreign buyers tax came into effect. It's a bit of a running joke amongst realtors. When I talk to my fellow realtors, we're often saying, hey, have you had any realtors or any buyers lately that have clicked off the foreign buyers tax? Nobody's had any. I sell, as people know, a lot of real estate. I have yet to have anyone check off the box declaring they're a foreign buyer. And I sell a lot of everything. Detached homes, townhomes, condos, from $300,000 up to $3.5 million. I have yet to have any foreign buyers yet. Another thing you should ask yourself with the foreign buyers tax, can somebody, because I've looked and I've tried to find some information on this, how much money has the provincial government taken in on the foreign buyers tax? Is it $1 billion? Is it 250 million? Is it 100 million? Is it 5 million? You notice how there's no numbers out there. There's no hard numbers. When the tax was introduced, it was going to produce all this revenue that was going to go into affordable housing. Notice how we don't hear any of those numbers, what they're taking in this. I can tell you that the numbers are nothing that they're taking in the foreign buyers tax, because nobody is triggering the foreign buyers tax. So before the foreign buyers tax came in, I blogged about this. I've got a chronological, go back into my blogs here. The market took a crazy turn in October, late September, early October 2015 is when the market started to go crazy. We had an influx of, we've always had a lot of Chinese buyers, but there definitely was some foreign buyers that probably came in there. And what was happening was the prices were going up. They started taking off in the fall of 2015. And for about 6 months until March of 2016, the market was red hot. We had a huge surge in the price in detached houses, especially condos too, but more in detached homes there. A 20% surge in about 6 months. Now what was happening was we probably had a number of foreign buyers that were buying at that time. They were coming in through the Quebec Investor Program. But almost all of these people, I can tell you, were in the process of getting their PR card, their permanent residency status via Quebec, or they were waiting to get their Canadian passports. So they saw the Vancouver market. They were already living in Canada, but they were waiting for residency. The market was going crazy in Vancouver, so they thought, gee, I'm going to buy now. The market's going up 5% every month. I better buy now while the getting's good, even though I'm not even going to get my residency status for another 3 or 4 or 6 months. So the market took a surge there. Once the foreign buyers tax was introduced, it immediately cooled the detached market, and it still hasn't recovered. It's down 10%. That took away the incentive, first off, 2 ways. It took away the incentive for any foreign buyers to buy a property. The market was stalled now, so there was no incentive there to get in while the market was continuing to go up. And B, I'll just wait now until I get my permanent residency status or my passport, so I don't have to trigger that 15%. Because nobody, who's going to want to pay a 15% tax that wasn't there a year prior? I'll just ride it out till I get my PR, and then I'll come out to Vancouver and buy the property without having to pay it. I can tell you right now, if someone can tell me how much money has been taken in, for argument's sake, let's say it was $100 million, which I don't think it was. I think that's way more than was ever taken in. It's probably more like $20 or $30 million. But let's just, for argument's sake, say they took in $100 million. I am quite certain that of that $100 million, at least 50 to 60% of that was brought in the first 2 months that that tax was introduced. And how do I know that? Is because it was all the people that got caught up without being grandfathered in. It was basically extortion. I blogged about it here. You had people that entered into contracts, foreign buyers, pre-sales, detached homes, on June 1st, but didn't complete until August or September, standard completion time. The tax came in, they gave everyone 1 week to complete. There was a mad rush to try and get things pushed forward, but only about 10% of them were able to do that. Some didn't have completion dates out for months. Some were tied to the seller looking for another home. It was a fiasco. So the vast majority of any money that was collected in that foreign buyer's tax was because of those people that were caught in the middle there and it wasn't grandfathered. And if you're aware, as you know, we have a class action lawsuit against the province of BC making its way through the courts. Probably going to be years before this is all settled. The lawyers I talk to tell me, though, that these buyers have a very good, strong case against the province. So those contracts should have been grandfathered in. And just how crazy it is, this new 20% foreign buyer's tax, the new raise, they're giving you something like 3 or 4 month window here. It is grandfathered. So it tells you right there, they're admitting to their guilt prior with the Liberal government by not grandfathering in existing contracts that you would not be subject to the tax. So somebody tell me how much money's been taken in with the foreign buyer's tax. It's not much. Nobody is paying for the foreign buyer's tax. Any foreign buyers now, if they are foreigners, they're just going to wait until they get their PR status or their passport. And remember, we are minting thousands of new investor class citizens via China through the Quebec Investor Program. I've done lots of blogs on it. So raising the foreign buyer's tax from 15 to 20%, it's a non-event. Carol James is talking big talk, saying that, you know, tough measures are called for and we're going to raise the foreign buyer's tax. It's just smoke and mirrors, folks. This foreign buyer's tax is a non-event. Nobody's paying for the foreign buyer's tax. They're crazy. Why would they? The other thing, though, is the foreign buyer's tax will now go to the rest of the province, not just the Lower Mainland here. Next up, They are going to increase the property transfer tax on luxury homes over $3 million from 3%, which they just raised a year ago, up from 2%, to 5% now. So any homes over $3 million will be subject to a 5% PTT. I'll try and post a link to the blogs I've done on PTT. It's one of the biggest tax grabs of all time. It brings in billions of dollars annually into the provincial coffers. They're drunk on the revenue. Just to refresh your memory, I'll post blogs on how the PTT works, but it was introduced in the 80s as a luxury tax. 1% on the first 200,000, 2% on the balance. Back when it was introduced in the 80s, only about 5% of all the sales triggered that 2%. It was a luxury tax on high value properties, which at that time was over 200,000. Shows you how much times have changed now. You can't even buy a studio apartment in Vancouver for under 400,000 now. But the crazy thing is, of course, the PTT has never been indexed. It's never been adjusted to allow for the tenfold price increases we've had since the 80s. So it is a massive, massive tax grab. We all know it. It brings in billions of dollars annually. But of course, not just the NDP, but the Liberals, all provincial governments are drunk on the tax revenues. They need that money. Without that PTT, our economy would collapse. Plain and simple. Look up the numbers that come in on the PTT. So that's why you got to be careful here. NDP government does know on one end that we can't crash this market. We don't want to do that because we're going to kill the goose that's laying the golden eggs in the PTT, in the construction jobs, and everything else. Real estate drives this province. It has for a long time, so people need to realize that. But this is another example of classic NDP, anyways, of taxing the successful, taxing the wealthy, taxing the business people, the entrepreneurs, the business owners that really drive this economy. And I know I'm not going to get any sympathy, and nobody's going to get any sympathy. That's why they target these type of people. The guy that owns the $5 million house and drives the Porsche, because they know it's an easy target. It's only maybe 1/5 of the top 1% that fit into this, who's buying those type of homes. And what are they going to do? Call up on CKNW and complain about it? They're not going to get any sympathy. And so the NDP government knows that. Let's target the successful people. And that's what they're doing here. And this is just another kick in the head to those people who are already down. I mean, the detached market is off between 5 to 15%, depending on the price range. Done blogs on it for a while now. The foreign buyers tax cooled that market drastically. The condo market and the strata market is still raging. So all this is doing is kicking the detached owner in the head while he's already down. So when you add another 2% raise to the PTT on a $5 million home, I can tell you, if you own a $5 million home and are trying to sell it, unfortunately, you just got another $100,000 or $125,000 knocked off your price, because the buyer is going to deduct that off his offer price. So you just took another $100,000 hit. So, but that's kind of the NDP's playbook. It always has been. Tax this minority. They're not going to miss it. They've got lots of money, and they're not going to complain because they're not going to get any sympathy. Couple more things here we'll talk about here. So they've got some other things. They want to tax Airbnb. That's fine. They want more transparency on pre-sales. They want to start tracking who's buying these pre-sales. If they're assigning them, you've got to start declaring a lot more of that. Hey, I'm all for that. That's great. They should have been doing that a long time ago. Now, though, they also talked too about they're going to create 114,000 affordable homes over the next 6 or 7 years. They're going to spend $6 billion on it. Those numbers don't add up for me. We'll have to see how this all comes about, but I don't know how they're going to create 114,000 homes for $6 billion. The numbers don't add up there. Not when those aren't going to be in Vancouver where they need them, that's for sure. Maybe that's out in the Fraser Valley or something, but in Vancouver where the affordability is really tough, I don't think you're going to be building anywhere near that many homes. Not when you're like Main and Terminal, those portables that they put up, the container units, I believe those were, someone can maybe clarify this, I think they ran around $275,000 per unit, and that didn't even include the land. It was city-owned land. So I don't know how they're going to make 114,000 units for $6 billion. That's excluding the land, I guess. I don't know. But the final thing I want to leave you with, that I'm going to continue with more on my next blog here, is what, and this is the wild card, and this is the one that's caused me a lot of phone calls from clients. This is the one I've been spending the last 4 hours trying to figure out here. Is what they're calling a speculation tax. Although, as one of my viewers pointed out on YouTube, it's not really a speculation tax, it's a vacation home tax, which I'll explain. But this is going to be a tax on people who either have a home that is empty, so consider it kind of a province-wide empty home tax, which we've already got in Vancouver, or it's going to be on a home that's not currently rented full-time, so a vacation property, which is what's going to be the majority of these cases are going to fall under. So just to keep it simple here, for 2018, it's going to be half of 1% of the appraised value or the assessed value, and then jumping up substantially in 2019 to 2% of the assessed value. So let me just give you this in a nutshell here. I had a lot of clients call me over this because I have clients in California, I've got clients in Washington State, Oregon, Ontario, Calgary, Detroit, Michigan. I've got clients from all over the place. Now, the majority of my clients are investor clients, the vast majority of them. So they have come up here, they've called me ahead of time, we've sat down, they've bought a condo in Cole Harbour or Steveston or the West End, but they're investors. They have put a tenant in there, hired a property manager to run the property for them, and it's tenanted long term. They will not be caught up in this tax. At least from what I can understand right now, they are exempt from this. Or I've got a guy from Calgary who bought a place, buys a place in downtown Yaletown, again, puts a tenant in it, he's okay. However, this is where it gets tricky here, and this is where it's catching up with a whole bunch of people who it shouldn't be taxing. These are people that have second homes or third homes, vacation homes. In many cases, they've been in the family for decades, are now going to be hit with this tax. So I'll give you a couple examples. In the Globe and Mail, there was a whole bunch of articles on people from Alberta who own vacation homes in Kelowna or Penticton. Some of them have had these homes for decades. They use them in the summer. They come up in the winter to do some skiing. This tax, because they're not using it full time, it's a vacation home, and they are not a resident of British Columbia. So if you're not a resident and you're not filing taxes in BC, you are going to be hit with this 2% tax. So if you have a $700,000, if you're from Calgary and you own a $700,000 condo in Lake Okanagan, this year, you're going to pay $3,500. Next year, you're going to pay $14,000 added on top of your regular property taxes. Ouch. That hurts. Now, going into the budget, this is what they said in the budget here. This speculating tax is what they're calling it, is aimed at foreign and domestic property owners who are parking capital in real estate and driving up prices in the province. So, I don't know for the life of me how they think a guy who owns a vacation home in Kelowna and has had it for 10 or 15 years is speculating in parking money. These people aren't speculators. They own the home, they use it as a vacation property, and now they're going to be hit with a $14,000 tax or more. You own $1 million property, it's $20,000 tax. You know, the guy that comes up, I've talked to some other realtors in my office who do work up in Whistler. Many of them have clients from Washington State, from Oregon, from California who have bought chalets up in Whistler and come up during the winter for a couple of weeks or a month, come up again in the summer. They let the kids use the property. They might let family and friends go up and use it for a week here, a week there. They are now going to be hit, if it's $1 million chalet, they're now going to be hit with a $20,000 tax on top of all their other taxes, including their property taxes. That is a heavy hit, and this is unprecedented, folks. I know people will say, oh no, there's other jurisdictions like this. Sure, in PEI, I think a foreigner can't buy oceanfront property, and I know there's some countries that ban foreigners altogether. This is a different animal. This is people that have owned property up here, vacation homes for years and years. They're not speculators, and now they're faced with a $20,000 or $15,000 or $20,000 tax hit. So essentially, it's the message really is the scary part here of what we're saying. We're telling these people from California and Calgary and Ontario that we don't want you here anymore. BC is only for people that live and work and pay taxes in BC, and we don't want you here. We're closed for business. And think about all the revenue that these people bring in. They're not speculators. They own homes. They come up here. I have a client, which I'll tell you in my next video, who has a place in Cole Harbour. He lives in California. Him and his wife and family and the kids use the property quite frequently throughout the year. They're spending money on taxis, rent-a-cars, restaurants, ski passes, you name it. They bring money into the economy. And this tax, the numbers I saw on this, they say that it's less than 1% would be affected by this speculator tax. But then the revenue they're talking about is $80 or $90 million this year. But the damage that's going to do to the economy is tenfold to that 80 or 90 million. That's peanuts what they're bringing in there for this. So stay tuned. My next blog, I'm going to talk more about this so-called speculator tax or vacation home tax and what a bad idea it is. But to summarize here too, is it going to have any effect on the market? That's what I should really get to here. Of all these tax changes that the NDP have introduced, is any of it going to have any effect on the average guy who wants to buy a one-bedroom condo in Vancouver? And the answer is no, it's not. It's mostly just smoke and mirrors. It's going to have an effect on the guy that owns the $5 million house in Point Grey. He just got another 100 grand taken off it with the PTT increase. As far as maybe some people that might have to sell a condo because of this speculator tax, it's a vacation home, it would be very small. It might be 50 or 60 units in downtown Vancouver, even if it's a few hundred, not a lot of inventory. That'll get quickly absorbed in. So I don't see it having any effect really on the condo market either. It'll do, though, a lot more damage, just the shock waves or the perception of what we're trying to do here, and saying that we do not want people from outside the province to be owning real estate here as a vacation home. And it's not going to do anything to supply. Think about it. Let's say the guy from California just calls me up and tells me, "Owen, just sell it. I don't want to pay the $20,000. Geez, you know, that $20,000 tax plus my $5,000 property tax bill, the maintenance fees, we're talking a total of about $30,000 or $35,000 to keep this Cole Harbour unit. Now that I got to pay another 20 grand, I could just take that money and I can stay at the Four Seasons and travel anywhere I want. Maybe I won't come up to Vancouver as often. I'll take that money and travel all over the place and stay in 5-star hotels and not bring the money up to the economy here that they do every year." So, you know, capital can move wherever it wants. And the message BC is sending is saying, we don't want you up here. It's just, the other thing too is, we're still trying to negotiate NAFTA, and this is just another nail in the coffin to it. This is going to get picked up by the American news, I can tell you. It's not going to affect a lot of buyers from the States, but there are plenty that own places in Kelowna. A few have places in downtown Vancouver. I have one, and lots of them own up in Whistler. So we'll see what the repercussions are. I'll do another blog, my next blog, talking more about this tax, and I'll give you a couple of stories from the front line, a couple of clients that I have that are caught up in this vacation home tax. I'm Owen Bigland. As always, I'll see you next week.